Hi.
Good morning. Good morning. Welcome, everybody. I'm Claire Holmes. I'm the Interim Senior Vice President of Public Affairs, and I'm very happy to be here today. And it's great to see you all. We have a very full room here in the lobby of Franklin, and we have other sites that are open and listening in. We wanted to do this town hall this way so that everybody had an opportunity to hear from the President, whether you're at your desk or you're in this room or you're in other rooms in other locations. So we are streaming this live, and the way this will work is President Napolitano will make a few remarks, and then we want to take questions from the audience. Many of you submitted questions earlier, so I may ask a few of those as well. And any topic is open for today. So just a couple of housekeeping items. If you would just take a moment to turn your cell phone volume down so that the integrity of the broadcast will work for everybody. And if you have any issues, we all have issues, but if you have technical issues, we have some help for you. You can call the service desk at 510-987-0457, and hopefully those of you that are at your desk heard that, and if you're having trouble with the broadcast, you'll be able to do that. So with that, welcome, good morning, and thanks for being here.
All right, well, thanks, Claire, and good morning. And I do have some prepared remarks. I scheduled this event because I wanted to hear directly, I wanted you all to hear directly from me about the recent state audit that I wrote you about a couple of weeks ago, and that has been in the news. I want to clarify some things about the audit and address any questions or concerns you may have about it. I also want to talk about some of the audit recommendations that we will be implementing in the months ahead. I really want this to be a two-way conversation, so I'm going to keep my remarks relatively brief. But before I get into the specifics of the audit, let me just begin by saying thank you. As we all know, the University of California is a unique and special institution in its size and its structure and what it contributes to people's lives, both our students, our staff, our faculty, but also to the state of California and indeed to the world. The Office of the President plays a vital role in supporting and providing leadership for the entire UC system. And our work here at UCOP, individually and together, is critical to the university fulfilling its role and to maintaining UC's standing as the finest public research university in the world, which we are. Yeah, give it up. So since joining the university, I've worked with many of you to implement measures that ensure careful management of our resources, transparency and accountability in our work, and improvements in UCOP operations. I'm proud of the progress we've made and will continue to make. As for the audit, my view is that all organizations, including UC, can and should always be looking for ways to improve and to embrace constructive suggestions. While I was disappointed in the overall tone of the audit report and believe many of the assertions about our practices were misleading and wrong, it does offer helpful recommendations that we've agreed to implement, most of which align with our ongoing efforts to continually improve. So I've appointed Rachel Nava, who's in the front row, our Chief Operating Officer, to lead an internal task force that will be responsible for leading the implementation of the recommendations, although everybody will be involved. The specific areas we will be focusing on include enhancing the OP budget process and revamping our budget presentations to the regions, beginning with our presentation of the UCOP budget at next week's Regents meeting. Reviewing and establishing a written policy concerning our financial reserve, reviewing funds that have been restricted as part of UC policy, reviewing the external benchmarks we use for our compensation and benefits programs, as well as our reimbursement policies and our salary ranges, developing additional guidance and tracking for system-wide and presidential initiatives, including workforce planning in our divisional strategic planning efforts that are underway and this latest budget development cycle. Those of you who read the audit report may have questions about potential impact on salary and staffing, and I'll address those during the Q&A. As we map out the implementation process, we will provide you with updates and details about the specific changes we'll be making and their timelines, so you will know what's happening throughout the process. Watch for updates in the link e-newsletter and other communications in the weeks ahead. Now, with respect to some of the factual findings in the audit, we do have some disagreement with the state auditor. Reserves. For example, the audit's assertion that UCOP has a $175 million reserve came as a surprise to me. And the idea that those funds can be used for any purpose is just not factually accurate. Almost half of the $175 million are restricted funds by law or policy, which means they must be spent on program areas to which they are designated. One example is UC's federally funded multi-year lab research grant program. This leaves $87 million in unrestricted funds, which is a pool of funds we use to support a range of UC priorities, such as academic programs and system-wide initiatives. These funds have supported many important efforts, including support for our undocumented student population, our efforts to prevent and respond to sexual violence and sexual harassment, and our cybersecurity efforts protecting critical data that UC holds against cyber attack. In reality, our true reserve is around $38 million, which we believe is a prudent amount for an organization the size of UC. As part of the implementation, as I mentioned, we are going to analyze best practices at other comparable institutions to ensure that we indeed have the right policy for reserves at the university. We also disagree with some of the audit report's assertions about UCOP staffing and salaries, especially where it compared certain UC positions and their salaries to one at the state or other universities. Some of these were inappropriate comparisons, given substantial differences between our positions and the ones they chose to compare them with. For example, as you know, we at UC administer our own pension plan, while the state relies on CalPERS. So some UC HR and finance positions have much broader responsibilities. We also manage more than $100 billion worth of assets through our Office of the Chief Investment Officer, which has implications not only for those pension investments, but also management of other key endowment sources for UCOP and the campuses. At the same time, some of the recommendations related to staffing, salaries, and benefits are helpful, such as making sure our salary ranges encourage employee development and pay equity. Our people here at OP and throughout the university are what make UC great. It's important for UC to remain nationally competitive in order to provide quality instruction, research, and medical care for our state, and also to appropriately recognize people for their contributions. To do that, we need to ensure our compensation and benefits practices align with the marketplace for both public and private higher education institutions, and maintain UC's excellence and the caliber of our talent. We also disagree with the way OP's role has been characterized regarding the surveys the auditor sent to campuses. Frankly, the way the surveys were administered created confusion and questions for the campus personnel who received them. Consequently, the people in my office worked with the campuses to clarify the purpose and scope of the audit and to help ensure that accurate, responsive information that reflected the views of campus leadership was conveyed to the audit team. While I believe we did things appropriately under the circumstances, it's clear in retrospect that we could have handled this better. For example, instead of working directly with campuses, we could have continued to work through the auditor to get them to engage with campus leadership to address campus questions and confusion about the audit. I regret that our approach has created misimpressions and takes the spotlight off the fact that we are accepting the recommendations in the audit report. So going forward, to avoid any misimpressions, we are adopting a policy to make clear that campuses should work directly with the auditor whenever possible. If there are questions where they need guidance from OP, all questions will be routed only through the campus internal auditor directors to OP's internal audit director, and vice versa. I hope that gives you a helpful and brief overview of my view of the audit, but I really want this to be a dialogue and for me to hear from you about the audit or indeed about any other topic. So let's have at it.
Okay, so we have some mic runners in the room who will help. They're in the back, and if you would just raise your hand, and if you get the mic, you can just hold it close to your mouth, and we'll be happy to take your questions. So who's the brave first soul? Yes, over here. If you would just also tell us your name and where you work.
Yeah, my name is Jeff Hall. I work in the Office of Research for Research Policy, Analysis, and Coordination. And my question really is, what do you think the impact of the audit and kind of the energy that we will be putting, I anticipate we'll be putting into it going forward, will have on OP's function? I would speak very selfishly. Our group, our job is to coordinate and facilitate discussions among campus administrators who are responsible for research compliance and the tech transfer function, a bunch of very important pieces out of the campuses, and that requires us going to the campuses, convening those groups, going to conferences on a national basis. And I would say over the last couple of years, our ability to do that has been very impeded or impinged because of budget restrictions. We have people who will figure out ways to go to conferences and sleep on the couches of friends in the city at the conference, to pay for their own meals, to sometimes pay for their own transportation to cost to those. And it's because of budget limitations that really are directly impacting our ability to function effectively. And I see kind of this latest kerfuffle as something that would further impact our effectiveness. I imagine that's true of other units across OP.
Is there a question?
Yeah, my question is, like, how are we going to be able to protect the functioning of OP in light of this?
Yeah, so, your description of what you do illustrates, the value and purpose of OP to help coordinate these multi-campus efforts, to enhance our national and international reputation where research is concerned, and contribute those research results to the world. As part of the implementation, we will be looking at, our reimbursement policies for travel. In my dream, we would get to a per diem sort of arrangement to get out of the everybody having to deal with their receipts and all that kind of thing. But we're going to take a look at that. I think it is fair to say that we're going to have to be very careful with the budget we get and the budget dollars we have. I think it's fair to say that the regents are going to be, at least in the immediate future, providing more direct oversight of our budget. I think it will be important for us to continually demonstrate the worth of the work that we are doing with those budget dollars and our effective stewardship of those budget dollars.
Thank you, Jeff. Next, other questions? Yes, over here.
Emma Sebastian from ITS and the OP Staff Assembly. I think a lot of staff want to hear what the direct impact for the next fiscal year or for the coming fiscal years of this audit will be for staff benefits, salary, all the things that will impact us directly.
Right. So a couple of things, and we're just at the beginning of unpacking a lot of these audit recommendations. So, but I do know that the budget that we will present to the regents next week will include the 3% merit increase again for staff. And I do know that we have to remain competitive for excellent staff. And so the key thing is to make sure that we have accurately gauged what the market is so that we remain competitive. And that's the work that we will be undertaking.
Yes.
Kathleen Irwin, I'm also in the Office of Research.
Can you wait just so the people on the that are watching will be able to hear the question? Thank you.
Kathleen Irwin, I'm also in the Office of Research. So, well, thank you for your comments and for your leadership. This is all different. I think it's difficult for everyone. And I do really feel that things you said before, and we're all so committed to the mission, and we are so ethical in our work. And so the question I have is that it already has felt over the last 3 to 5 years that we have spent an awful lot of effort in clarifying, justifying, documenting, and I understand the need for the public view to make sure we continue to do that. I do have a concern about how we can actually do the work if we're spending even more of our efforts explaining the work that we do and justifying it. And those are two different tasks. And I just, I don't know what the solution is. I think it's a concern that some of us have because we seem to spend a lot of time already doing the things and it hasn't, sometimes it comes through.
Yeah, so, my hope is that when we're all said and done, that we've actually streamlined while we are making more transparent how we document what we do. Because you're right, we do document, and there's no hint in the audit of any unethical or misused funds. I mean, that's not in there at all. So the challenge is in a very complicated budget where you have different programs, some single year, some multi-year, you have different funding streams coming in. I mean, I've dealt with public budgets for years. I've never seen one as complicated as UCOP. So we're number one. But to unpeel that onion in a way that provides the regents with comfort that they can execute the kind of oversight that they have, and that keeps the legislature out of directly appropriating our budget, which was one of the audit recommendations. I think we should view this as an opportunity, actually, to look at what we're doing and clarify it, streamline it, and make it even more transparent, and not to add unnecessarily to the documentation that already is undertaken. But again, to make sure that it's very public, how we spend our money.
Way in the back, over here. Thank you.
Good morning, Janet. I want to say you're doing a really good job on explaining plus one. I just have a question. That's what I was told by my father, who's 87, who watches CNN all day. When I came home that day, he said, Janet has $175 million in her bank account. I wonder what she's going to do with that. So I admire you for explaining that. I do have a question. You said out of the $175 million, a portion of that is for restricted funds.
Yeah.
I'm familiar with the restricted funds because I do work in budget and operations. But I'm wondering about the $38 million. What is going to happen with that $38 million? What is it going to be used for?
You know, I really view it as a contingency fee that we hold for emergent issues that arise during the year, like in any major organization. For example, a couple of years ago, UCLA Health was victimized by a massive computer hack, and that revealed some real holes in our cybersecurity, not just at UCLA Health, but throughout the system. And we had to immediately put some money into the effort to do intrusion testing and to really clean that up. And so, you know, having some money held back that you can use for those emergent type of problems is what any good organization does. So that's, you know, that's why we hold it back.
So maybe you could talk a little bit about what the 175 is being used for, because she works in budget and knows, but maybe not everybody does. So that might be helpful.
Right. So again, as I said in my remarks, about half of it are restricted funds, and they're restricted either by federal law or a direct state appropriation, or by virtue of it being a long-standing UC program that says we will only use this money for this purpose. Some of those monies come via the campus assessment. Some of them come from endowment proceeds. They come from a mix of funds, but we're not free just to use them for any purpose. Now, as part of our implementation of the audit recommendations, we're going to go back and review those restrictions and make sure that they are the right ones and that they still hold. But that's how we view those funds. Of the remainder, about $49 million are used for presidential and system-wide initiatives. And these include a variety of things. They include, for example, some of our work in carbon neutrality. They include, for example, some of our support for undocumented students. They include, for example, some of our efforts to deal with sexual violence, sexual harassment. And as part of our implementation of the recommendations, we're going to go through and make more clear to the regents, you know, what those initiatives are, how the spend is, et cetera. And then you're left, when you subtract it all, with the $38 million in the reserve.
Very helpful, thank you. Yes, up here.
Steve Garber from the Provost's Immediate Office. So they keep referring to these funds in the audit as these secret funds. And so I'm kind of wondering how they got to that conclusion, because I would assume that with any budget, at the very bottom, there's a carry forward amount that any auditor would see. So I'm wondering, is that a question around our system and how things end up looking when you look at reports, or is it a misunderstanding of what they were looking at? I just want to understand that a little bit better.
Yeah, so in our view, these were far from secret funds. They were used in a way that was very public, that was presented to regents, that was in the press. You know, we are part of the UC-wide audit that's done by PricewaterhouseCoopers, and they caught that they were carry forward funds. And, you know, ironically, right before the state audit came out, we got our evaluation from the bond rating companies because we were getting ready to go out with a bond. And all of them complimented UC on its financial management, budget management, et cetera. But where we can do better is to show directly how those one-time funds are used for system-wide and presidential initiatives, and to do it in a way that to the extent we can, is reviewed in one place by the regents when they do our annual budget review. But there was nothing secret about how these monies were being spent.
Good morning, John Galva, Alumni Constituent Affairs. Like you and for many of us in the room and online, this is not the first one of these we've gone through. And in my 21 years managing external relations at the university, the tone that I'm hearing from the outside world is different this time. And that's, for the most part, it's in two ways. It's comparatively quiet. And those that are contacting me are asking what they can do to help us address what they perceive as the petty politics of it. So my two questions to you in that regard are, what tone are you hearing from the outside world and our friends? Secondly, how can we employ our friends out there who are offering to help you and help us in the political side of this?
Well, I've heard different tones depending on the audience. So I'll just
Symphony.
or cacophony. I think by sharing with our friends the information that I've presented, and I think we can help ourselves by being as open and transparent as we possibly can with how we manage our budget, and to show that we really are accepting the recommendations and that we really are implementing them. And we want to be known for effective and good management. I mean, that's our goal. So, and just, sharing, that view with our friends and supporters.
Hi, my name is Eileen Foster. I'm in the Program Management Office, and similarly to your question, but slightly different, I have been involved in a number of audits at our various campuses, but when I read the audit findings for this year from the state and then also in our previous year, what I was surprised to find was the inflammatory nature of the language. And I'm wondering if there's anything that we plan on doing to try and get in front of kind of the subjective nature of how the findings are delivered to us.
Well, we tried this time, or the regents tried. They had a small group that met with the auditor over the course of the audit to discuss issues of tone. Weren't successful in that regard. And, unfortunately, I think we're, positioned to be fighting with the auditor when in fact we are accepting the recommendations of the audit. And, that's why, one of the reasons why I regret our interaction on the survey, because it created a misimpression that we were directly interfering with the audit, which was not our intent by a long shot. But we'll continue working with the auditor and try to deal with those tonal issues. But it's difficult.
Li Fong Chang in Research and Graduate Studies. I noted in a recent news clip that a single voice, albeit a very influential one, Christopher Newfield, faculty at Santa Barbara who runs a very influential blog, called for an internal oversight review, as opposed, which is somewhat different from the call in the 33 recommendations for an independent external review. I'm wondering first whether you could speak to that idea. And secondly, I'm wondering if relatedly you could address the one recommendation that you do not agree with, which is the constitutionality question of why UC should, the UC Regents should oversee itself and the UC operations, and what your take on why that is something that needs to be defended.
Yeah, so I don't read Christopher Newfield's blog, so I don't know what he was referring to. We have asked, and the Regents will, to find an outside entity to work with us as we go through implementation of the audit recommendations, to give us some outside perspective about best-in-class management and whether the practices and policies we have are truly best-in-class. Because that's what we should be, right? We should be best-in-class. And so I believe the Regents will adopt that next week at their meeting. In terms of the legislature directly appropriating the budget of UCOP, I think that does raise constitutional concerns vis-a-vis the autonomy of the university. The Regents are the ones assigned by the state constitution to oversee the operations of the university. And that's why the Regents submitted their own response to the audit, objecting to that recommendation. When I was at the hearing last week with the Joint Legislative Audit Committee, there were a number of legislators who voiced agreement with that point of view, that they were not in the best position to oversee our budget, that was really the role of the Regents.
Thank you. I have one from online in advance, if that's okay. I think you might have answered part of it, but just to honor the questions coming in advance. In light of the audit and the heightened security, scrutiny and criticism of us in Sacramento and the media, do you anticipate changes to the operation or the scope, or envision any other major shifts at UCOP up to and including headcount? We're at the very beginning of doing the analysis called for in the audit. Right now, I don't envision any change in headcount, but that's that's for the present. I'm going to be careful now and just say that I think we do a very good job for the university, and that everybody has a role in that. So, and I think for an organization the size of the University of California, the size of OP is relatively small. Our total budget is about 2% of the overall budget of the University of California. That's a very thin administration level. So read that as you may. Thank you. Other questions in the room? Well, I'll ask another one. Okay. So this person is fairly new here, about a year and a half. Was exclusively in private industry, and asked about your perspective on being a public servant in various capacities at the state and federal level, and asked, how did you learn the skill of effectively building consensus, and how did you incorporate it into your leadership style? And then as a follow-up, how does UC compare and contrast?
Yeah. UC is unique. And we are. I mean, when you think about all the roles that we fill, the education role, the research role, the public service role, and how we do that, I mean, it's pretty darn incredible. And how we've continued doing that under increasing stress on the budget. And, you know, even with that increasing stress on the budget, increasing enrollment, for example. You know, there's a lot of push-pull there that we have, with the good work of many of the people in this room, managed our way through. I will say, I think we're going to continue to be under budget stress. And so that's why we have to be good and effective stewards of the dollars we do have, and very transparent about how we spend them. And in terms of building consensus, you know, I think the key thing is to have people on board who believe in the mission. So that you start off with a consensus. And I think that with the people in this room, and maybe those watching, et cetera, we have that consensus. So I want people to feel good about what they do, and when they come to work, that they're doing something valuable and contributing value to the organization. So we're going to continue to work on that. But, you know, I think you start off by having people on board who already believe in the mission. And you do, right? Yeah.
Other questions from the room? I have one more from Advanced. Anybody in the room? Okay, well, I'll do this one and then maybe we'll wrap up if there's no more questions. So you think about your question, because otherwise we'll wrap early. Could you speak to what's happening with UC's internal or global initiatives, such as the one with Mexico, and how do you feel they're progressing, and what can UC employees do to support them?
I think that, you know, we have a number of initiatives that really are designed to reflect the so-called power of 10. And one of those is UC Mexico. And we have the UC Mexico initiative because by virtue of geography and history and culture and economy, California has a very strong relationship with the country of Mexico. And it seems to me that the University of California ought to be a national leader in how we interact with Mexico. And that means working with their institutions of higher education, working with their government, and fostering student and faculty exchange, fostering joint research. By way of example, when I was in Mexico City a few weeks ago, I was there with the Mexican Secretary of Energy, and he announced a grant program on energy efficiency, which requires the respondents to the grant, and it's a $10 million fund, to partner with the University of California. Have you ever heard of a government grant that does that? I mean, it's a very special arrangement recognizing the strong role that the University of California has and should play with Mexico. And so we also have the Global Food Initiative. And this is an initiative whose mission is to do the work necessary to set the world on a pathway to a nutritious, sustainable food future. It unites a number of academic disciplines, from the agricultural sciences to environmental sustainability, to business and supply chain management, to public health. Under the guise of that initiative, we actually fund dozens of food fellows on the campuses. We support food pantries on the campuses because we're dealing with food security at home amongst our own population as well. So a lot of those funds go into campus related activities, but they're designed to unite the university as one with one central goal. Carbon neutrality is another one where we've set the goal that we as a university will be carbon neutral by 2025. That goes directly to the issue of climate change, but it also goes to our research and public service missions that we, with such a large footprint in California, ought to be leading California and the country and the world by way of how we manage our energy, our intake, and our output. Under the guise of that initiative, some remarkable research is going on, including the publication of a document that was joined in by a number of UC faculty from different campuses on 10 scalable solutions to global climate change. That's the kind of impact that we can have on the world. And so we pick through the initiative some of the big issues that face the university, and these are what some of the initiatives do, and really address them as a system.
Thank you. Okay, don't leave here without your question. There we go.
Nancy Fleestrack from OPHR. First, thanks for taking the time and talking with us because I know a lot of our employees have been asking questions. Just your thoughts on, as we enter into our employee engagement survey, which is being launched here shortly, what are your thoughts about the impact that this might have on morale and your guidance to us as all leaders and how we help our folks move through this and continue to engage at a level that we know our staff have been engaging in, and to ensure that we keep them focused and not distracted?
Yeah, so I think what we should do is view this as an opportunity for introspection and analysis, and an opportunity to demonstrate that we are best in class, and we will continue to be. And we need everybody joining in that work to make sure it happens and that the public knows about it. You know, I would say to encourage our staff to view this as, like I said, as an opportunity, and that we are all going to have to join in and implement the recommendations. It won't. Rachel's leading the internal task force, but it's not going to be only Rachel. It's going to be everybody. So we all need to link arms and you know, get the work done.
Great. Okay, last call. Oh, okay, over here. Thank you.
Hi, Vince Cook from Institutional Research and Academic Planning. One of the striking impressions I had reading the audit report was their failure to assess any of the benefits that were provided to the campuses, like in the form of cost savings on some of our initiatives. So I'm wondering what can be done going forward to better quantify and communicate what those benefits are.
Well, I think that will be part of our work going forward. You're right, a lot of the programs that we administer are of direct benefit to the campuses and to the students on the campuses. And so that's one of the reasons why making more transparent the presidential and system-wide initiatives is going to be important and should advantage us. you know, even in the audit report, the auditor noted the value of the initiatives. Well, we need to raise that up and make it more public, and what the contributions of the university really are, and what the contributions of UCOP, what our contributions are to the campuses. You know, following up on your question, I think we also need to make more clear that where we have had staff increases, that's been strategic growth, where we've decided to centralize more some functions. Functions like how we manage investments, functions like IT, functions like legal services, and functions like procurement, you know, using the size and scale of the university to try to strike better deals with our vendors. So it's difficult to do a one job like, well, if we do it here at UCOP, we save, you know, 10 jobs on the campuses. But we certainly should endeavor to make that more clear. Where we are growing, it's by strategic and intentional decision, not just by happenstance.
Great question. Anybody else? Warming up.
Hi, I'm Nicole Rance, and I'm with the UC Office of the National Laboratories. And I was wondering, thank you again for your time and actually being, you urgently get the information out, which I think is key. And I think communication is the key. I was wondering if there's a communication plan going forward with, you know, I'm sure there's going to be many teams. Again, like you said, Rachel's not going to be the only one doing important work to address all the findings, should we say, but how is that going to be handled? So as we go through, not only for employees to understand, but actually, you know, the public, and also, obviously, we'll get back to the auditors, but just the communication, it's almost like location, communication. Just wondering how, if that's been been addressed.
Yeah, so we will have a communications plan that goes along with the audit plan, and it will be both internal and external, and it is designed to make very public what we're doing, what changes we make, and why. We are even going to have a website that will be available. Anybody can go on and see the work plan and the timelines, et cetera. So we will benefit by more communication. You know, the more the public knows, I think the better the public will feel.
Okay. Anybody else? All right, do you want to say some final remarks, or?
I think again, let me just reiterate that we are viewing the audit and the recommendations as an opportunity for not only for introspection and analysis, but to ensure that we are truly best in class and are demonstrating that we are best in class. So we accept the recommendations. We disagree with the factual allegations, but we accept the recommendations, and it's going to take all of us working together to implement them. And that's what we're going to do.
Thank you so much for your time, and thank you to the team that put this together.